Hi, this is Dr. Joe Luciani, and I'd like to introduce you to a powerful technique called Mind Talk. Mind Talk is the core of my Unlearning Anxiety and Depression program that combines the science of neural plasticity, which is where you'll learn to actually retrain your brain, cognitive behavioral psychology, and motivational coaching, all to teach you to self-coach yourself back to health and solace. In this video, you'll learn step 1, how to separate facts from emotional fictions. You'll find steps 2 and 3 presented in separate videos. And it's important that you go through the steps sequentially, developing a working understanding of each step before progressing to the next. So if you suffer from anxiety or depression, no doubt you're feeling victimized and powerless. But what if you were to treat anxiety and depression as habits? Habits generated by insecurity-driven thinking. Now you know about habits. Habits are learned, and habits can be broken. So how would you break a habit of anxiety and depression? Well, like any habit, you have to learn to stop feeding it. And this is where self-coaching comes in. Thoughts matter, especially insecurity-driven thoughts characterized by doubt, fear, and negativity. Now clearly, one negative thought isn't going to make a difference, but over time, these cumulative, toxic, stressful thoughts will actually change your chemistry. Think of a bucket containing the balancing chemicals of your brain: dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. And think of insecurity-driven thinking as holes that we poke in the bottom of the bucket. Now, if you keep poking holes, what happens? Well, your vital balancing chemicals will drip out, and you become emotionally as well as chemically depleted and susceptible to anxiety and depression. Mind Talk will teach you how to stop this depletion and restore your emotional balance and tranquility. And once you stop the sabotaging thoughts of insecurity, your bucket will begin to replenish itself. And this is your body's natural homeostatic tendency to self-regulate, to restore your natural resilience and verve for life. This is the goal of Mind Talk. So let's begin with step 1, learning to separate facts from emotional fictions. Now, in order to separate facts from emotional fictions, you must first learn to distinguish your healthy voice from the voice of insecurity. For example, someone manipulated by neurotic emotional thoughts might think, "Life is too hard, I can't go on, I just can't do this." Now, when you say you can't go on, then you, in a Zen sense, become one with the voice of insecurity. In this case, you literally become your depression. There's no separation. End result, emotional struggle. So what's necessary is for you to make a distinction between you, your healthy, detached voice, and the contaminated voice that comes from the habit of insecurity. By making this distinction, healthy voice versus insecurity-driven voice, you put yourself in a position of realizing that you really have a choice. You can passively listen to insecurity and be negatively affected, or you can resist. So how do you begin the process of resisting insecurity? Well, you begin with what I call detached critical awareness. For example, you might ask, who in me is saying I can't go on? Is it me telling me I can't go on, or is it my insecurity? Now this is the essence of step 1, distinguishing truth from emotional fiction. This may not seem like a big deal, but trust me, it's the first nail in the coffin of a passive mind capitulation to insecurity. You're not going to have to look too far to find these thoughts. They're the thoughts that invariably churn up distressful feelings and reactions. So the next time you feel that knot in your stomach, or a wave of depression, observe what's going on through your mind. And that's where you'll observe insecurity in the form of doubts, fears, or negatives. Now recall the scenario I mentioned a few moments ago. Life is too hard. I can't go on. I just can't do it. We can illustrate this struggle by showing how insecurity can be overshadowed by normal, healthy thinking. And this would be especially true if you were experiencing chronic anxiety, panic, or depression. So now let's take a look at another example where insecurity is only partially contaminating normal, healthy thinking. This depiction would be especially true if there was some ambivalence. For example, why am I making such a big deal out of this? It's not the end of the world. I've got to stop worrying. In this case, you can see where the healthy mind is trying to battle off the influence of insecurity. This kind of confusion is typical of worrisome ruminations, the what ifs. As you can see from these drawings, whether you suffer from moderate or severe anxiety or depression, it all depends on how much your healthy thinking is being eclipsed by insecurity. Now let's take a look at what a healthy detachment from insecurity looks like. In this scenario, the habit of insecurity is having no noticeable effect on normal functioning and thinking. This detachment is the goal of mind talk. Unfortunately, now if you currently suffer from anxiety or depression, you're likely to experience some contamination from insecurity. And as you'll see in the mind talk steps that follow, a healthy detachment from insecurity actually cuts off the fuel that reinforces insecurity. In time, the habit of insecurity will be neutralized and rendered impotent. When you critically observe destructive thoughts, feelings, and perceptions, you're actively attempting to separate and categorize these thoughts as either facts or emotional fictions. And by making this distinction, fact or fiction, you're empowering yourself and your rational mind to take a step back and scrutinize the validity of what your passive mind would have traditionally accepted out of habit. And this is a crucial first step that lays the groundwork for what's ahead in step 2, which is putting an end to insecurity's dominance over your emotions and your perceptions. So let me illustrate this critical concept with a story of a boogeyman named Clarence. When I was young, probably around 4 or 5, I was told there was a boogeyman named Clarence living in our attic, who, if you didn't behave, would do, well, God knows what to you. I never wanted to know. I never wanted to know what was. So I have no idea why I was told this, or why parents would want to scare the bejesus out of their children. But nevertheless, that's what I was told. Okay, and here's my point. Clarence, like all boogeymen, wasn't real. He was a fiction. But the impact he had on me was very real. You see, I was terrified of Clarence and the attic. And then at some point in my young life, I did what any adventurous kid would do. I wandered very, very cautiously up into the attic to peek into Clarence's lair. No Clarence. And after a few more cautious excursions into the attic, I began to wrestle with 2 competing perceptions. Clarence was either real or Clarence was fake. Now, I may not have resolved my fears in that moment of clarity, but I certainly was on my way to extinguishing them. And this is why separating facts from emotional fictions is so important for you. Listening to and allowing yourself to be needlessly compromised by the distortions of insecurity, it's really no different from my being afraid of Clarence. But once you recognize there is no Clarence, no factual basis for insecurity, doubts, fears, or negatives, then you begin to reinforce your conscious, uncontaminated perceptions. This is the point I discussed previously. You begin to realize that you have a choice. You have a choice to decide if Clarence, in the form of Insecurities distortions, is real, or if Clarence is a fiction. Anxiety and depression rely on the distortions of a Clarence-like stranglehold on your feelings and perceptions. Now, as a postscript to Clarence, I should point out that many of my fondest post-Clarence memories took place playing in that old attic. I had my Lionel train set up, a workbench for making models, and it was a refuge on rainy days. And you see, this is what happens when you dispel the toxic fictions in your life. It opens up opportunities for untold riches. In your case, the life you've been denied and the life you deserve. So before moving on to my step 2 video, make sure you have a firm understanding of the need to separate facts from emotional fictions. This is the foundation of what's to follow.